I'm Chris Stevenson. This is Strange Assembly, and I'm here with another Loresheet Spotlight for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. Loresheets are one of my favorite new elements of V5. Actually, it doesn't really count as new anymore. V5 has been out for a little bit. Anyhow, one of my favorite elements of V5. They had a nice little extra bit of flavor, nice little extra bit of crunch to a character when they work well. Today I'm talking about Descendant of Helena. The Toreador Helena is one of the OG vampire Methuselahs. She appears in the classic old Chicago by Night books, where she is a central figure in the original Vampire the Masquerade published chronicle. She's on the cover of the original Vampire the Masquerade Player's Guide. That picture of her, you got the little inset on the lore sheet in the V5 core book. Got a t-shirt of that. It's awesome. Controlling her pawns while she was in torpor, she was also the creator of the Succubus Club, which is itself a Vampire the Masquerade icon. And she remains active behind the scenes in Chicago today. If you go pick up the 5th edition Chicago by Night book, you'll find her there. Now, if you've watched my prior Loresheet Spotlight videos, you already know a lot of Helena's millennia-long history because it's tied up in her rivalry with Menelae. You can check that out. We'll put a little link right here in the video, and I'm not going to repeat it here. But suffice it to say that she overshadows him out of character. She overshadows him in character. They're rivals, but he never really gets the upper hand on her. Sometimes it's a draw, sometimes she wins, but he never really wins. You could try to make an argument that he's somehow sort of morally superior to her, but this is the sort of argument that still involves the morally superior person being an evil blood-sucking monster who is a complete hypocrite in all ways. Welcome to Vampire. And her childer themselves are sometimes a who's who of Vampire the Masquerade. We've got a former Justicar, we've got the Prince of France, we've also got the final regent of the Sabbat, all descendants of Helena. So let's go on to the lore sheet itself. So first, what is the flavor it gives you on the lore sheet, and what is the actual mechanics, and is this something you should be interested in taking? All right, so it says, some claim she dwells in the Americas, constantly at war with her rival. Others say she runs the most popular vampire nightclub in the world. A few believe she is the clan founder's lover, and that she is in the process of waking the Toreador antediluvian. Beautiful and gifted, it is said none can look away from Helena unless she wills it. Mortals have died to be the first to witness her artistic creations. Her descendants all display an immense level of talent, exemplifying the traditional Toreador role. It is a stereotype few Toreador resent. Helena is a clan icon. Toreador want to get to know you so they can get a little closer to her. Of course, like we just said, most of that, some of the in here is in fact canonically true. In Vampire the Masquerade, she's not actually at war with Menelae anymore because he's dead and she's not. Helena is still in Chicago because she managed to break the beckoning by engaging in mass diablerie of other vampires. Hey! So the 1-dot power here is called Skin Deep. No matter your standing, dropping Helena's name in a conversation with a Toreador or a vampire who knows of her effectively raises your status by 1 dot. You can do this once per story effectively. So for 1 dot, you get an extra status. Now, from a purely mechanistic point of view, you might say, Chris, that's terrible. Why would I buy a dot of status that only works once per story when I could just buy a dot of status that's always on? Well, it's because you can't really just buy a dot of status that's always on, right? Something has to have actually happened in the game that raises the status of your character. For most starting characters, or even moderately experienced characters, that's going to be 1 status, right? That's the up-and-coming neonate. Okay, sure. If you're a really effective neonate, maybe you can do well enough that they'll treat you like you were an ancilla, and now you got 2 dots of status. But unless you're getting into one of these power games where your characters are, in charge of the city, you're going to be kind of capped there unless you get into these conditional status effects. And once per story is not to be laughed at. It's not always there when you need it, but it really is there most of the time when you're needed. So Exactly who this is going to impress is unclear, but it's going to impress any other Toreador, and probably any vampire of age is going to recognize her and therefore get you that extra status. And really, are not the old vampires the one who's most likely to care whether or not you have a little extra dot of status? You know, maybe they're willing to talk to your pretending to be 3 status character when they would not otherwise be willing to talk to you. And hey, it's only one pick. The 2-dot option on the Descendant of Helena Loresheet is Real Talent. Unlike other vapid Toreador relying on their faces and bodies alone, you were embraced for your talent. Choose one skill from Craft, Etiquette, or Performance. Increasing this skill costs half the experience points that it usually would, rounded down. Historically, there have been a lot of merits like this in Vampire and other World of Darkness games, and I am not a fan of them. Where you pay something now and you get an XP discount later. Partially, they're just very mechanistic. It doesn't do anything in play. It's entirely an out-of-character experience cost benefits, and so you're really just sitting down and doing the math. Does it work out in your favor? The other problem is that to make merits like this work, you need to start out bad at whatever it is. Right? The flavor of the thing, like it just said there, you're being embraced for your talent. Well, if you're really talented and you start off with like 3 or 4 dots in that ability, that's the thing you're really great at, there aren't enough dots left to make it worth it to pick up a merit like this. Now, it does work a little bit differently in V5 though. So V5, it actually kind of has the possibility of working out because you have an actual expenditure of experience points during character creation in a way that you didn't in prior editions. So, right, you've got your small number of background dots. You use 2 of them to take real talent. And up to that point, you didn't put anything whatsoever in your chosen skill. But if you're a neonate, you get those 15 experience points. Well, if you're paying half price, you can go from 0 to 4 in a given skill for 14 experience points. So it's expensive to get up to 4. Unless you're a specialist, you might not start with anything at a 4. Even if you are a specialist, you probably just have the one thing at 4. So this is really, if you want a character who is really good at performance and has a lot of other skills, right, you're basically going to be sinking all of your other experience and some background points into this being super good at 2 things, or super good at one thing and then lots of dots everywhere else. Now, you're also not going to get to do anything else during character creation that's optional. And I'm still kind of bored by this as a type of merit, but at least you can make the math work out here in a way that you really could not in prior editions. The 3-dot power on Descendant of Helena is Embrace the Stereotype. When the time comes, you can play the role of shallow Toreador, surrounding yourself with an entourage of sycophants and throw a party that becomes legend. Once per story, you may host a party to increase your status and/or influence by 2 dots with an invited group, and the increase lasts as long as the party does. Now, this is the second time you've got a conditional status bump. This can also be a conditional influence bump. And this is kind of narrow, but getting people to come to a party is probably a lot easier than getting them to do something of substance. And this is something that's in your control. You get to decide when to have the party. You get to decide how to deploy this ability. It does require you to be somebody who has at least some status or influence anyway. If you don't have a way to get the people to your party, then this doesn't do anything. But the sort of character who is going to be a traditional Toreador throwing parties probably has the social skills to make that happen. This does give you 2 extra dots at once, but it does also cost substantially more than Skin Deep. I'm not sure if it's worth that much more if you're using it just as status. It's probably more powerfully deployed as influence, because if you have a group that you have a decent amount of influence over, and you can get them to this killer party, now all of a sudden you effectively have, influence 4 or something, and that is the sort of place where people are falling over themselves to help you. So, once per story, being able to get an organization to do whatever you want can be pretty potent. So, you have to be building a character who's going to be able to throw this kind of party, but if you do, you can get a lot of mileage out of Embrace the Stereotype. The 4-dot option on Descendant of Helena is Divine Purity. Unlike most within Helena's extended family, your perfection is more angelic than devilish. You can commit any sin, but you will always look innocent. Add 2 dice to your dice pools when making tests to avoid blame for your actions. Well, so let's be clear. Your character in Vampire the Masquerade is absolutely going to be doing actions for which they deserve to be blamed, but that they do not want to be blamed, right? So this is going to come up. Kind of like before, you have to think, is it worth it? Well, it's 4 dots, 4 dots in a background. If you buy that with experience, it's a 12. That makes it cost as much as buying a 4th dot in Subterfuge. So if you're not yet at 3 dots of Subterfuge, I don't think that this is worth it, right? Just buy more Subterfuge. That's generally what you're going to be rolling to get out of this sort of situation, and you're going to use it all over the place anyway. If your Subterfuge is already that high, I guess you got to decide how often it is that you think you're going to try to get up to this sort of shenanigan. Realistically, I think you're probably just better off buying a 4th dot of Subterfuge, but this at least gives you a little bit of flavor. The final and 5-dot power for Descendant of Helena is Succubus Club Franchise. Helena succumbed to the beckoning in recent years, leaving the Succubus Club in Chicago to a manager once again. She bestowed a license upon you to establish a franchised Succubus Club in your domain. This rare honor guarantees the city's kindred respond to your call, as every vampire embraced in the last 200 years has heard of the Succubus Club. As long as the club remains open, the chas rating of one of your coteries' domain increases by 2 dots. You also get 4 dots to spread out among resources, fame, and status amongst all kindred. Alright, so first let's talk about the flavor of this ability. I love the Succubus Club. If you are an old school vampire player, the Succubus Club is probably near and dear to your heart. I honestly think that you can probably kind of litmus test how long you've been involved in Vampire the Masquerade. If I say Vampire Nightclub and you think the Succubus Club, that probably means that you're an old school tabletop player. If I say Vampire Nightclub and you think of the Asylum, then you probably played Bloodlines first, which is fine. They're both fun. And of course, there's an Asylum-related merit elsewhere in the core book. So I really like the Succubus Club. Do I really care about the flavor of this mechanic, though? I'm not actually doing anything with the Succubus Club. I have my own club in some other city, and I'm basically paying a licensing fee to Helena to be able to call my club the Succubus Club? Okay. So, I really like the Succubus Club. I don't get really jazzed by this flavor, but hey, maybe you do. So, let's look at the mechanics of it. Well, if all you're looking for is efficiency, mechanical efficiency and power, this is an excellent merit. You spend for 5 dots and you get 6. You just get a free dot. 2 of the dots have to be in chas, which is probably the best thing that you can spend dots on during character creation because it makes feeding a nice, efficient thing when you're in your domain instead of something that's constantly fraught with peril. And the other ones are going in resources, status, and fame. Well, resources is super great. Status is handy. Fame, I don't know so much. But just being able to do, I'm going to take 2 dots of chas and 4 dots of resources, that's from a, mechanically power level point of view, that's something anyone would be happy to have, and you get a discount on it. But from a design point of view, I don't like Loresheet powers like this. Right? There's a lot of Loresheet powers that are basically, I pay for the Loresheet and then I get some dots. I pay 3 dots on the lore sheet, and I get 3 dots of herd, or whatever. When it mechanically balances, okay, whatever, I get it. They're not super interesting, but think of it more of as inspiration, right? Oh, you taking this vampire as an ally, what would that look like? Or mala, I guess. It gives you an idea of what they would cost and how they might interact with you. So it's a little bit more flavorful way of just buying mala 3. What I don't like, though, from a design point of view, is ones where you pay a certain number of points and you get fewer dots out of it, or you pay a certain number of points and you get more dots out of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It can be fun to take as a player. I get extra power. But from a design point of view, why? Why, if I choose this lore sheet, do I spend 5 and get 6? I don't like that. I think it's bad design. At least it's exciting. It's even worse design when it's I pay 3 and I get 2. Because now it's mechanically weird and no one's ever going to want to take it. So I don't like this from a design perspective. But if you're the sort of vampire who wants to have a club, and I've played that vampire in that coterie before, if you want to do that, this is a really efficient thing to take at the start of the game. If you're just going for power, there you go. Succubus Club franchise. So we've been talking about the lore sheet Descendant of Helena. It is in the V5 core book. I hope you found this useful. I'm curious to hear, what do you think about these powers? Do you think I'm spot on? Do you think I'm getting it completely wrong? Hey, is there some other lore sheet that you would like me to take a look at next? If there is, drop me a comment below. And while you're at it, here's my obligatory, hey, like the video, watch something else, subscribe to the channel, etc., etc. Visit us at strangeassembly.com for some written content, that sort of thing. But until then, I'm Chris Stevenson. Never stop gaming.